So one of the reasons that I love working with you is because you are skilled at the invisible. And what I mean by that is we can find millions of people that technically do what you do, which is set up the cameras and the lights and a field where people can tell their stories, and even the interviewing, right? I've seen great interviewers. But there are some times when we're on set where I just look at you and done. We already know what energy shift has to happen. The one I recall specifically was we were fiddling with somebody's wardrobe, and you just looked at me and you're like, we're not going to do that. We're going to figure out another way. But that this person is so sensory that this is completely taking her out of her body. And it was like a 2-second switch, probably $100,000 worth of a piece of advice. But it's because you can feel something. What is it?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Still real?
Still real.
Still real.
Well, in that moment, as a practical, I think perhaps my sight or my intuition is also rooted in the logic of we work with incredibly high performing individuals. So here's a highly accomplished person that we are honored to have come sit with us, right? And immediately, I can look at how she carries herself, and I'm like, baby girl is a student of excellence and has very high expectations for herself. And therefore, she expects she's going to be excellent at this. And also, she has never done this before. So just that in and of itself, I'm like, this is not like sports where just because you were excellent, at volleyball doesn't mean that it's going to translate to having a flow state that you always naturally drop into with your coffee and your computer in the morning when there's cameras present. So for this particular individual, the moment I watched her vigilance in the room, I was like, she's used to running the show. I love this because she's so excellent at what she does. And I think of it as, I use all this silly language around, who's leading and who's following. Can we create an environment of trust where people can let go of control? As a former recovering control freak, and I think that for that particular person, recognizing, they have tabs on everything happening in the room at any given moment, and in this moment with all eyes on her, she actually can't be in that state. And so watching, deflecting to humor, watching, a bit of, she had her finger on the pulse as much as she could. And that's when it was like, every time that she's trying to drop in, any time that someone is approaching her to adjust wardrobe, I'm watching the fast glitch in her eyes as she's taking in what's happening and who's coming to me and why are they approaching me? Oh, is it this? Is it that? Is it, it's this thing? And so much care and her presence dropped to the superficial rather than the anchoring of her presence. So immediately it was like, calm down all stimulus so she can start to breathe, because she stopped breathing. She stopped thinking her thoughts. She went into outward perception because she is so successful because that's worked for her in most situations. But when it comes to being on camera, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. You can't like ultra mind chess the cameras. Like, there is no getting over if you're feeling inhibited. It's just documented. So the context of understanding that moment is really knowing that feeling of powerlessness in the moment and recognizing people's traits that are, they're used to running the show, and I love that they run their show.
Right.
So now trust me to run mine.
Oh, I love that. And you also feel something. So what is that like for you? Is it chills up and down your spine? Is it inner knowing? Like, do you see dead people? Like, what's happening? Are you informed by what's, I mean, I should say for everyone listening that Shelby and I joke around all the time about seeing dead people because there's the Sixth Sense scene, and because we might see dead people. So quite literally, it's something that swirls in our world, but also it's the sense that helps us do all other things in our world. So tell me about, I mean, oh my goodness, I just think about if people knew, like, after shooting, how you and I could be talking about editing, but then we're like having a drink or having a sip of whatever, and you go, Ushi, let me tell you about this time that I met this woman who told me to go tell this girl something, and I did, and this whole thing. So tell me about that story. It was so beautiful. And you might have been like, this girl's gonna think I am so crazy. And I was like, oh no, this is, yeah, of course this is life.
Okay, so yeah, this was such a fun, just a special moment of realizing our gifts are so much bigger than gifts for ourselves. And also our lives are they're meant for so much more than just our own experience. I went to Bethel School of Supernatural Ministry. Of course. Let's just talk about Hogwarts of evangelical Christianity. Went to this community because I was radically, I had a very crazy upbringing, and I didn't have hope. And then I had this encounter with God at 14, and I stopped partying, I stopped doing all my little shenanigans, and then I was like, I didn't know I could live with hope. And therefore, anyone that ever walks into this youth group, another kiddo that comes from a household that's not safe, I want to know that at least for the 2 hours they come to this environment, that they are so loved. And so coming out the gate with that kind of heart energy, I wanted to go to ministry school to know how to hone that. And I'd been told throughout my life, try to not put Christianese over it, having sight, having the ability to see things without having any reason why I should see them, or how I know something about someone's past or what they've gone through, though I don't know them. I don't know what's gone on in their world. So I had an experience after I'd actually walked away from that gifting, I would say 6-7 years after leaving that type of culture. That was a very unique chapter of really pressing into the supernatural and miracles, signs, and wonders, and trying to raise people from the dead. And, there's a lot over there. We'll just put that on the side for a moment. I stepped away from practicing my gifts, and I moved to this little sleepy, sweet town. And I moved to Galveston, Texas. I love Galveston. And I'm helping open a yoga studio. And there's this amazing woman there the night of the opening. She's one of the instructors. I see the back of her head. I'm like, man, cool, nice hair. Like, whatever. Like, I don't know her. And I have this dream that night. And throughout my life, the way that God speaks to me, one of the ways is through my dream state, or the place between dreaming and waking. So I have this dream, and it plays out like a movie. I'm laying hands on this gal that is just this random yoga instructor, and I'm doing an etiquette that I did in ministry school, of a way of praying for people. And I'm not doing that anymore in my life then. And I'm praying for her, and I hear this audible voice of God that says, Rebecca is coming into a new level of wisdom and understanding. And I'm like, well, that's cool. Thanks, God. Ugh. And then the other person that's praying for her in this dream goes, Rebecca, I keep hearing that you're coming to a new level of wisdom and understanding. And in the dream, I go, oh, no way. I just heard that too. And then I woke up. That was the dream. It's just the same message 2 times confirmed. So I wake up, and usually a God message like that is linear. It's not like a cheese pizza weird dreams. It makes sense. There's a beautiful clarity to it, and I'm like, oh man, that's one of those God dreams. Oh shoot, I don't really do the whole God dreams thing anymore. But oh crap, I think this is important. I gotta tell her. So I'm like going through this like Rolodex at the yoga studio to find Rebecca's number. Rebecca's not actually her name. And I find her number. It's like 8:30 a.m. I call her and I leave this voicemail. I'm like, hey, Rebecca, my name's Shelby. I saw you at the opening the other night. Hey, I have a message for you. Give me a call back. She calls me back, 9:05. I'm like, hey girl, this is gonna be so weird. I don't know how you feel about this, but I had this dream for you. And I think there's a message. I'm gonna tell you. So I tell her the dream, tell her the message. I don't interpret it. It's not my job to interpret. And she's like, what time did you have this dream? And I was like, it was last night. And she was like, okay, cool. And she was like, so I'm a medium. I see dead people. I get messages from people from the other side. I put that gift away for, I had somebody that was manipulating that. So I shut it down several years ago. But I told my mom last night while we were watching TV, she said something came over me, and I said, Mom, I'm going to open my gifts back up. I'm going to open up to hearing and receiving those messages. It feels like it's safe to do that again. And so she goes to bed. She goes to Sangha in the morning. You know, she sits in meditation and prayer and silence with other people. And I'd sat with her later after this had happened. It's a silent room, and you are sitting in silence for an hour, doing natural mind, natural body, natural breath. That's the meditation. So you're supposed to be quiet, and she is sitting there, and these hot, like oil-filled hands come through her chest. She feels her heart get squeezed and feels the intensity, which if you're not familiar with mediums and that traditional way of hearing, oftentimes to have a message from somebody that has died, you feel the sensation of how they left. So she feels the heart being squeezed and it's painful, and then she feels these hot oil-filled hands come through her chest. Big man hands, and she's like, that's Ross. That's Ross. That's the engineer that I used to work with at this big organization. And so she's like, he died 9 months ago. He had a heart attack. So she's like, oh my gosh, it's Ross. And I can feel, big Texas boy, oil-filled man. She's like, is this Ross? So the hands come through, and she's like sobbing in this silent room. Not cool. And the message that he tells her is, tell my daughter that I love her and I see her and I'm with her. And so she's like just overwhelmed by the intensity of this experience. And she's like feeling it, she's receiving it. She opened herself back up to get these messages, and she comes out of Sangha, picks her phone up. There's an unknown number. Here's the voicemail. Hey, my name's Shelby. You don't know me. I have a message for you. And so we talk, and I say, yeah, Rebecca, you're coming into a new level of wisdom and understanding. And she's like, oh my gosh. She's like, I normally would just like kind of keep this to myself, but again, this is so intense. I think I actually need to find Ross's daughter. So she goes on this Facebook hunt, finds this gal, and she's like, hey, you don't know me. I'm Rebecca. I think I have a message to share with you. Can you hop on a call? And she talks to the daughter and just relays the facts in the Texas hands. And she says, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I was planning on taking my own life. This is the 3rd time my dad has came through in the last 9 months. And when he comes through to people, they all say he comes through with hot hands through their chest. That's like his signature. So she was like, oh, thank you for sharing that. And I needed that. And so Rebecca gives me a call back after this experience, and we're like, dude, what? And they're like, okay, wait. So like, you see dead people? Okay, cool. You get messages from God? Okay, cool. Should we be friends? And then she became one of my best friends for several years, and we were able to explore. She provided such beautiful compassion she came from a different spiritual lineage, a different way of approaching it, but it gave me so much peace because the particular lens of Christianity that I was trained in, with hearing from God, getting messages from beyond, whatever that is, there was a lot of things that were vilified. And I mean, a lot of Christian culture would say, you got a message from someone that died, that must be demonic, that must be evil. And yet that message stopped a woman from taking her own life out of the depression and anxiety of the grief that she was in. So it was such a gift to start to work out, what does it mean to walk with God? What does it mean to be someone that walks in the light? And if you have a skill set, how do you learn to work with it and not vilify something that obviously produces life? And it was the coolest thing to have someone to explore that with, and realize that with the practicals of my upbringing, I had a lot of experiences with demonic, or what could be perceived as evil. And I had a lot of dark spirits that were the beginning of my childhood. I was very frequently interacting with very dark entities. And it scared me to the point I used to try to tape my eyelids open as a little girl because I didn't want to blink, because they would get closer and closer at night. And instead realizing that those energies, they were being fueled by my fear. And by me being terrified of them, I was actually empowering them, instead of, oh, I understand you're drawn towards this. However, it's not for you. You need to go away. And I mean, and the faith or the walk that I've worked in is understanding the name of Jesus carries a lot of power. So it was learning how to bless people with light and bless these presences, and saying, I understand this is delicious. However, this is not for you. You need to keep going towards the light. And that completely shifted a life being lived in fear, and a life being lived utterly terrified of what's going to happen if, is my house going to get haunted? Is my house going to, because these entities coming around, there's lots of activity that would be charged. And realizing that, oh, I am not the victim to this. They're like Instagram trolls. They're just orbiting. They're just in a different realm.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting too there is like, why are we letting them live in our sphere? And sometimes things can live in our sphere because it's a good thing. Like, it's uplifting, it's nourishing. And then sometimes they live in our sphere because of a narrative that we bought into. And when you were sharing about your gifts and, all the reasons we shut things down in our world, because when you come in as a kid, you're surrounded by everybody reconciling their own identities and their own gifts and their own misunderstandings and their own, I was told this and I believed it even though I didn't believe it, right? And a lot of my early influence was Indian culture, daughter of immigrant, and I started to see that the way I shut my gifts down is by doing it the right way. Ooh. Because what was so wonderful about, I also, by the way, I just have to start by saying, like, I had a very privileged and loving upbringing. So it wasn't because people were telling me shut down your gift. I think it was mainly they were like, well, how do we even raise this girl? Like, says things that nobody understands how she even knew that, like, what are we going to do? And she's got all this energy. And so it wasn't because of trauma. Like I didn't, it was more because of narrative. Like you're going to grow up, you're going to marry a guy, you're going to, have your SUV in your house in Orange County and you're going to be happy. That's the recipe for happiness, which is like laughable because some of these people who had that recipe were like really unhappy. So I was like, okay. And I knew that also as a 3-year-old, right? But how do you like live in this world where you're like, wait, you are the one who's saying that, but you're not happy? Like a 3-year-old girl is not going to call people on it in that world. So I digress with that story to say that what it taught me was how to succeed according to other people's wants for me, and how to get love by pleasing others and a narrative that would work for them. Now, you can be really successful in the world learning that skill because I know how to please clients. I can read the room. I can adjust something in a way that's like, wow, how did you do that? Well, I know how to please you, right? I know what you're looking for. I know what you want. That created in me a lot of overworking and trying to find the tactic or trying to find the blueprint or try to find what I perceived others had that I didn't. And when you were sharing your story about I just followed my impulse and it ultimately led to somebody not committing suicide. Like, look how you could go out in the world and go, I want to build an organization that helps people not commit suicide. And that works, that's effective. But you could also just follow the impulse of that moment. And for me, the way that I receive messages, and it does feel like a receipt, it doesn't feel, or receiving, it doesn't feel like I'm grasping. I know when I'm grasping, but for me, it's like there's a hawk in my backyard. Why is there a hawk in my backyard? Before my son was born, there were 3 circling a building in San Francisco. I lived on the top floor. That's not where the red-tailed hawk rolls, right? So, okay, great. Look up what the red-tailed hawk means and then, okay, see how it, what resonates in that message. That was my thing to either tell the person or tell me or to tell my son. And a lot of times, like, I will draw it or I will work with that symbol. And then when I work with that symbol, that's the message. Like, that's the thing. That's the next step. And the way I shut that down was by being a performative designer for much of my life, right? Like much of my career, until, something happens that breaks that up where it's like, this isn't you and it's not working for you. Usually it's like burnout or a bad client interaction or a breakup of some sort. And you realize like, I'm suppressing a part of myself and I'm really effective. Like I'm really good at doing the right way, following the shoulds. I think the world is doing that, right? We go to work, our choices are based on obligation versus this feeling of, maybe call it connection, I call it aligned identity, that when I'm in that place, if today the thing is to call Shelby, you call Shelby. And if I feel like I need to connect with Eliza, there's no Eliza in my world, but Eliza, you do it. And it doesn't make sense in the world of marketing, what I just said. It doesn't make sense in the world of business because people want the predictability. They want a budget. And I'm not saying no to those things, but it's been so much more powerful and joyful for me to follow those impulses of the aligned identity, of the receipt of information. Even when I don't understand it, there's something about going forward, even if I don't get what's about to happen, but I always get the circle back. I always get the thing that tells me that was the right move. So whether it's somebody saying, I didn't commit suicide, or somebody saying, I really needed that because then this happened, always.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Still real?
Still real. Still real.
On this show, we dive headfirst into the untamed, often hilarious, and always honest realities of life as ambitious women. The kind of stuff that delights your inner child and gives her permission to play. We know you're multi-hyphenated, ultra-successful in your own right, and you crave real connection. So, Consider this your intimate invitation to the most intriguing tea party of your week, where vulnerability is our superpower, quirks are celebrated, and the truth is always poured piping hot. Your seat is always waiting for you at our table. And be sure to visit our website, stillreal.studio, to join our next event.